I think that it's important to realize that when you're ready to buy a home, you cannot cheapskate your way into your first purchase or your next purchase.
Anywhere near water source, you have to have GFCI, and that's so that you don't get electrocuted. Basically, it'll cut the power off.
What's going on? It's your brother, your uncle, your boy, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor coming to you with another installment of the Equity Podcast. As always, whenever I bring a guest on this show, it is to inspire, entertain, or educate you as the end user, you as the end listener or the viewer if you're watching this on YouTube. And today is no different. Every single guest that I have, they have poured into me in some kind of way, or there's something about them that really has helped me take my business to the next level. So as a real estate professional, I have to have my dream team, if you will, of professionals. And my guest today is Mr. Brandon with Precision Home Inspections GA. How are you today, Mr. Brandon?
Good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Brandon is my go-to home inspector for all of my clients here in the great state of Georgia. We have worked together for some years now, and I met Brandon, I met Brandon through a referral of another inspector who got out of the game when I first moved here to Georgia. And I said, look, man, I'm a real estate agent here in Georgia now. I need to know who you would use and who you'd use if you no longer were doing inspections. And so that gentleman referred me to Brandon. I learned a little bit more about his business, and we've been rocking and rolling ever since. Brandon, I want to just jump right in as a real estate agent to you as my go-to home inspector. I'm going to wear several different hats in our conversation today. First, as a real estate professional and the value and the importance of partnering with a really good inspector. And then I'll also talk as a new buyer, the things that I want to make sure that I learn from you as the inspector. And then I'll wear the hat of a seller and how to prepare my home the best way possible to make the most money possible. But before we get into all that, Mr. Brandon, tell the good folks a little bit about yourself and we'll jump right in.
Brandon Johnson, born and raised in Atlanta. I grew up on the South Side, College Park, Riverdale area.
Love it.
Kind of. I stayed on that end for the majority of my life, and then got older, moved out to Gwinnett, kind of finding myself, as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old. Fast forward, to 2015-ish, I started Precision Home Inspection. Kind of, it was weird because my wife and I were actually looking for a house to purchase, and a part of the process was a home inspection. So I was like, hold up, so I got to pay somebody $300-400 for a home inspection?
Man, yes. Yeah,
What is
yeah.
this all about? So, and from that point, I just dove in. I was super interested. I wanted to know more. I wanted to, at that time, just make extra money. And then, it was a good fit for me at that time. So I just dove in completely. I mean, so I've been doing home inspections full time since 2016.
Wow.
I love it. This is the first job, and the best thing about it is the first job that I actually, every house is different. Every house is, it's not like going into a building every day where you have to see the same people and go through those same, hey, good morning type. It's a new house, a new person, a new situation. So I'm always, just out there just finding what I can find and doing as much as I can for the buyer or the seller, or depending on who hires me.
I love that,
Um,
man. I love it. And like I said, Brandon's my go-to. Any and every time we have done quite a bit of business together. Now, I like how you explained your beginnings in 2015, Brandon. And this just goes to show that real estate has many paths. Obviously, when you originally think about real estate, you might think about being either a real estate agent or real estate investor. But those two individuals in those two fields have a ensemble cast that supports them in their business, and it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. So becoming a home inspector again is another way to get into real estate, and I honestly feel like it's a cheat code specifically to my real estate investors, because if you know what to look for in a house as far as what could go wrong if you're interested in real estate investing. And as we are expanding as a company into doing real estate investing here in Georgia, because we do it in other places, Brandon is always who I lean on as far as what he thinks is a good deal and what he thinks may be too costly to walk away from. So, Brandon, client base what does your client base typically consist of? Do you deal mostly with owner occupant buyers, real estate investors, or is it kind of a mixture of the two?
Yeah, it's definitely a good mixture.
Mm-hmm.
It's I get buyers, people just trying to purchase. They want to know what's going on with the home.
Yeah.
I get sometimes people trying to sell the home, so they kind of want to have a heads up on what things they want to fix,
Right.
whatnot. And then some of my investors. So a lot of the investors that we deal with, they're not as much into the smaller items.
Right.
Anything minor they're not too much into, so we kind of tell our reports for our investors as a like a 5 area inspection. So that'll be like your major areas, and that pricing would be a little bit different as well.
Okay.
But we could do that for them, like I said, and that will cover like roofing, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, the foundation, major stuff, and then like a full detailed inspection will literally be everything. It's just a little bit higher, and some investors like to cut their costs by getting, less in-depth inspection.
Right.
Just tell me about the major stuff. That's what they say.
I love it. And I think that, when you're wearing the hat of a real estate investor, most of the time, especially if it's a real estate investor, I'm thinking like myself as a real estate investor, you're just looking to add value to an existing property that may be outdated, may have a lot of issues going on within the home, but they're normal issues within, an older home, or a home that has not necessarily been well maintained versus first time home buyer. Those types of buyers are definitely more nervous because, of course, this is their this when you buy real estate, for most individuals, this is your single largest investment. And so, as a first time home buyer, especially when I'm dealing with my couples, one spouse may be like, oh, okay, no big deal. But then the other spouse, they may hear that, there may be a leak somewhere in the plumbing, or that the roof has a little bit of water, coming in, and then they just immediately get scared and say, I don't want the house. And so I try to explain to folks, specifically my clients, that, no house is perfect, but ultimately Brandon and his team are going to let us know to the best of his knowledge if this is something that is still worth holding on to, and maybe asking for, concessions, things of that nature from a negotiation standpoint, or if you should truly, walk away from this. But Brandon, I think a lot of times, and I want you to speak to this, a lot of times clients expect you I don't, as and most real estate professionals don't, but of course, the buyers typically expect you to know every and anything going on with the home, even areas that you logistically or physically are not able to get into. So, when you do an inspection, how do you approach it as you go into each home? What are the things how do you start your inspection process with a home?
Yeah, that depends on the home as well. So
Right.
depending on if it's a slab or a crawl space or basement. So if it's an average home, 2-story on a slab, I would
Yeah.
normally go in and try to start on the top floor.
Okay. Why
Start
is that, if you don't mind me asking?
normally the drainage lines. So
Mm.
everything as far as coming as far as the bathtubs, the showers and stuff on the second floor, I want to run all of that stuff thoroughly.
Okay.
So that once I do the bathrooms, do the bedrooms, attic, and I go downstairs and I use my moisture meter or my thermal imaging camera,
Yeah.
it will identify any leaks in the ceilings or walls or things like that. When you
Okay.
start on the first floor and work your way up, you will more than likely miss those things.
Mm.
So and especially if it's a crawl space or a basement, you start at the highest point to run everything because of the drainage lines.
Okay.
And that's it's good to have a good routine so that one, you don't get sidetracked.
Right.
You don't want to get in there and like sometimes I tell clients, hey, let's kind of if you got some questions, ask before or after.
Right.
Because if you don't have a good solid routine as far as going in and knowing what you're going to do first, second, third, and so forth,
Yeah.
people will be, hey, come look at this. Hey, can you? And then you're scatterbrained and you might forget something.
Right.
So it's good to have a good routine. So normally start off on the top floor. I
Hmm.
work my way all the way down, checking as much as possible. If it's an occupied house, we're not allowed to move dressers and
Right.
beds and things of that nature, but we do look around and kind of peek under to kind of get as best, a visual as we can. But
Right.
working our way down that's a good routine because honestly, I started off just bouncing around. And it took me, months to realize,
Yeah.
all right, you're forgetting or doing this. So here, let's come up with a routine. And I've
Right.
been doing that ever since 2016.
I love that. I love that. And I think that that makes your job faster. That makes you more efficient, specifically if it's a much larger home. I haven't come across any three-story or anything like that, in my profession. But your average home is going to be your two stories, right? And here in Georgia, basements are present, but they're not always finished. In most cases, specifically with new constructions, individuals will buy a home and then they'll just buy it and they may or may not finish the basement out. But do you find that one is more difficult to inspect than the other as far as a basement home versus a slab home?
So a slab is definitely hands down going to be easier because
Mhm.
it's what I mean, you don't have to worry about water intrusion and some of the things of a basement and crawl space.
Right,
If it's a finished basement, normally you have access to the walls and
right,
stuff to look around.
right,
Certain things like the smell in the basement, certain things that alert you to, all right, it's possibly water intrusion or
right.
mold or whatever the case. But when it's unfinished, that's the best situation because then we can see all the walls, the
Right.
framing, any open penetrations, mold, leaks from the ceiling. It's a lot better as far as inspecting wise because we can see more.
And I want to speak to a couple of scenarios that Brandon and myself had to tackle in our time working together. And when I tell you again, this is the power of having a really good inspector. You'll hear you'll hear varying schools of thought depending on the real estate professional you're working with, where they will put the onus on the consumer to find their own real estate inspector, versus some real estate inspectors that'll say, well, look, I have someone that I've used that's tried and true, and I have used them for a number of my clients. They've got great reviews, things of that nature. I tend to lean more on the side of having a team of individuals. Of course, you are my primary inspector. And so, for me personally, as a real estate professional, if I even if I had nothing to do with the situation, I'm going to get blamed for it, even if the client found their own inspector. So for me, I think it's best because many buyers will ask us as the real estate professionals, do you know someone that does X? Do you know someone that does Y? And so with Brandon, uh, 9 times out of 10, I'm like, look, here's a report that my guy did on another property. I want you to check it out. That way you have an idea of how thorough he is. And that has been the the reports that Brandon puts together. Boy, you thorough, man. I'm talking about from the rooter to the tutor. Now, is that something that you just personally do in your business, or is that a requirement? Because I failed to ask, what type of education, licenses, things of that nature that you have to get and certifications that you have to get as an inspector, because you are incredibly thorough, and I always appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so the state of Georgia does not require a home inspector to have anything. You
Oh,
don't have to have anything at all in the state of Georgia.
okay.
Thing about that is, if not having any credentials, probably not as a good of an inspector.
All right.
Things like taking the extra step to get your business license, your EIN, and setting up your company as a real company.
Right.
That puts you one step ahead of the person who doesn't have those things because one, You can't get a new construction. You can't do any new construction without a license.
Right.
All your credentials in order.
Right.
So you have to go to school, and there's a lot of schools out there. Most home inspection schools. The big ones is like Internachi, Ashy, and the list goes on. If you look, it's the one I went to is actually in Georgia. It was a 30-day course. You go like 3 days a week, and they take
Okay.
you on inspections and stuff, hands-on training,
Oh,
and you
that's
get
cool.
certified. From that point, it's up to you because, to be honest, on you, any home inspector that's newly certified, you're gonna go on that first inspection kind of just missing stuff because you know what I mean. You
Yeah.
new, and they only can teach you so much in
Right.
that short period of time. And home inspection, just like real estate, is an ongoing. You're learning every day, every week because things are changing.
Right.
So yeah, I just I wanted to have my company set up the right way. So I kind of went and did everything, got everything set up.
Yeah.
So sometimes new construction asks for stuff called like a certification called Cabo, and I
Okay.
just had one last week where they asked me for an engineering degree. No
Wow.
reason for a home inspector to have an engineering degree. If I had an engineering degree, I probably wouldn't be doing home inspections. Um, because you know what I mean. That's a
Yeah.
whole nother level of education and training or whatnot. So
And you're talking about structural engineering degree, or like a not like a chemical engineer, but like a some
structural, yeah.
structural engineer. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and when they asked for that, we're like, and it seems like some construction. New construction, they kind of want you to lean towards using who they know, or I guess
Right.
in association maybe.
Right.
But most people are going to want their own third party, knowing that they're working specifically for them.
Right.
So you do run into different hurdles, but most home inspection companies are going to have the basic, which is the license, certification, insurance, and ICC. I'm ICC certified.
What does that
Then
mean?
you go
What?
get stuff like termite. So we do termite inspections,
Okay.
radon inspections, we do mold inspections. So all those things that we get certifications for, we have to take additional classes and courses for.
Okay.
But it helps out tremendously.
What is the ICC certified? What does that mean? The ICC, what does that stand for?
So that's the international code, as far as like how when you build a house you have to have certain guidelines to
Yeah.
how the garage needs to be built or how the deck is
Okay.
built or how the GFCI where it's placed and stuff.
Yes.
So those
Yes.
are codes.
Gotcha.
And,
Gotcha.
so that's all included. So while I'm doing my inspection, I provide my clients with the free mold inspection and visual termite inspection, and
Right.
we do $25 additional fee for a termite letter.
Okay.
But we try to make it so that it's like a one-stop shop: sewer scopes, radon, air quality, and a
Yeah.
few other things as well.
And I think that when you are, buying your first home and or your next home, and if you're interested in doing that here in the state of Georgia, of course, feel free to click the link to schedule a call with me below, and I'll put Brandon's information if you're in the state of Georgia, because he goes, you've gone as far south for me as almost Macon, for one of our closings, but I think that it's important to realize that when you're ready to buy a home, you cannot cheapskate your way into your first purchase or your next purchase. There are going to be expenses that you're going to want to be aware of, and I, as a real estate professional, will walk you through. And any real estate professional that's done it for some time will be able to walk you through what are some of the things to expect to pay for at the onset when you find that home you like. You submitted an offer. That offer's been accepted, and now you're going through the process of closing. But you got to realize that you get what you pay for. So if you are buying and you don't get what you don't pay for either as well, and what I mean is that peace of mind is worth its weight in gold. So I have some clients, Brandon, and there are other clients out there that they'll buy a new construction home, and they will assume that because it's brand new, they don't need an inspection, but it's actually the flip side. You actually need two different inspections when you're buying a new construction. Walk folks through the suggested inspections that a person that's looking to buy a brand new home should get, because they actually need two inspections when it's a new construction?
So with new construction, we do sometimes what's called a pre-drywall inspection on the
Yeah.
front end.
Right.
That's before the walls, the insulation, sometimes siding. That's before all those things are put up, and
Right.
that helps to identify like structural concerns,
Yes.
open wall penetration, envelope leaks in the walls,
Right.
different framing, lots of different things as far as before the walls go up.
Right.
So it's always good to get a pre-drywall inspection,
Yep.
then the final inspection. And another good thing would be a radon test.
Okay.
With these older homes, they've been, let's say for example, a 20-year-old home.
Yeah.
People been living in there. It's more than likely every house has a small amount of radon, but it's more than likely not going to have cancerous amounts of radon.
Okay.
So I always suggest in a new home, you have no idea.
Right.
So it's always good to get a radon test just to make sure because I mean you wouldn't want to get cancer and
Yeah.
have that being an issue over $200 when that'll last you. You can get tested every 5 years with radon,
Yeah.
and I think that a regular inspection and then radon and maybe a termite will be the best things going into that inspection because it doesn't matter what house it is, it's got some type of problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I noticed that the termite. So there are five biggies that I have learned because I would sometimes if we're logistically available, I will actually accompany Brandon to the inspection, and so I think that it's important as buyers, as Brandon alluded to earlier, let Brandon do his thing because a lot of times buyers may think, well, I need to show up so that I can ask him about this or I can ask him about that. But I've now gotten to the point with my clients that we will have a conversation with Brandon once he's done with the inspection. And I think that that's important because oftentimes well-meaning buyers can distract you from what you're trying to do or knock you off your cadence, as you mentioned, as far as the way that you approach homes, because you're trying to, of course, make sure that they're happy and then also make sure that you do your job. But I think that the five big areas that I always say, look, these are the areas that when Brandon's done, we're going to ask him about, and he's going to give us his thoughts on this, and that is termites, the electrical wiring, foundation, HVAC, HVAC, the roof, and did I miss any of them? Anything else?
Foundation structure.
Yes, yes. And I always say, no home is perfect, no home is perfect, but as long as those areas, those big areas that we just mentioned, those 5 or 6 areas, as long as those are good, then
Mm.
it's a solid home all for all intents and purposes. But have you noticed anything changing as they're throwing more homes up a lot faster that you're running into when you do your inspections?
Yeah, I get a lot of surprises. When it's an older home, as a home inspector, we know older home's going to have electrical, probably, certain things because it's an older home, unless it's been fully renovated or whatnot. But
Right.
new construction, it's always normally something. Let's say, for an example, the roof. It's almost always like a wavy situation. It's
Hmm.
it's like 50-50 to be honest with you. A lot of times you'll think it's a brand new roof. And this is touching back on when I first started. I didn't have a drone when I
Yeah.
first started doing home inspections. I had binoculars, so I would
Hmm.
like stand somewhere out in the street.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of try to look up there, and there was so much stuff that we missed. So
Mm.
fast forward, I got a 30-foot pole and attached the camera to the top of it,
Okay.
and was putting that up and realizing, man, it was probably so much stuff I was missing
Yeah.
using those binoculars by using the pole. But with the drone, I'm able to catch a lot of different angles and
Yeah.
drip edge things I would never have seen before with the pole
Yeah.
or with those binoculars. So I would say with new construction, it's normally going to be like doors not closing properly,
Okay.
different roofing, minor defects, not like the whole roof would need to be replaced.
Right.
GFCI, that's the number one thing in the new construction.
And what is
Out-
GFCI?
Oh, so GFCI is ground fault circuit interrupter. So anywhere near water source, you have to have GFCI, and that's so that
Yeah.
you don't get electrocuted. Basically, it'll cut the power off.
So that's a special type of outlet, ladies and gentlemen. It can't just be your standard electrical outlet. It's got to be an outlet that has that wiring or something in it to where if water comes in contact with it, it cuts that, it trips that wire.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And a
yeah,
lot of times they have the outlet there, and it looks regular.
right,
A lot of times they're tied in together, so all the bathrooms are going to be tied in together to the electrical panel or to another outlet.
right,
Laundry room normally has a single outlet, probably either a test and reset button or goes
mhm,
back to the panel.
right,
But yeah, without that, you definitely, could get electrocuted. And a lot of times they have the outlet there, and then they have the sticker at the top saying GFCI protected. So
okay,
when we test it, it's not. You know what I mean? So that's an
oh wow,
issue as far as safety.
okay,
So new construction is a lot of more minor stuff. Normally, I
yeah,
would say every once in a while I find like a major foundation, something every blue moon.
yeah,
But normally it's just like a bunch of stuff that just wasn't, maybe because of the various different contractors that they have,
yeah,
coming to do different things.
yeah,
So some stuff seems like not finished all the way, and sometimes it actually they need the home inspector to point out something because the builder's gonna, if I point something out as different from somebody who doesn't have that experience.
right,
You know what I mean? Like when we do 11-month warranty inspections, some people didn't even get the inspection on the front end, but when it's
yeah,
the warranty inspection, now they want an inspection because they want to capture all these things to submit to them before their year warranty is up.
right. And I think that that's if you're doing that, buyers out there, if you're still if you're working with me, you're not doing that. But if you are doing that as kind of a way to, you know, keep from paying a lot of money up front, you end up doing yourself a disservice, in my personal opinion, because what you don't address on the front end, you will have to address when you're ready to sell that home and your new buyer has an inspector like Brandon and they catch what you didn't want to catch on the front end. And now that problem has more than likely become that small problem has more than likely become a big problem that had you just went ahead and just spent the money and got the pre-drywall inspection, got the secondary and final inspection, then you would have been able to get ahead of it, at a much cheaper cost, or maybe even something that was paid for by the builder. So, Brandon, pivoting here for a second, I do want to talk about, how important is relationships with other real estate professionals? How important is that to your business?
Oh man, that's a lot of my business. I mean, to be honest with you, we get random calls and stuff like that, but it's
Yeah,
a lot of it's like people like you, not good people that we've been working with for years.
yeah,
They know I'm going to do a good job. They trust me.
yeah,
So we just continue doing business, and they know once they call me, I pretty much take care of everything else.
yep,
I call the client, I email, you know what I mean? I do everything step by step, get to the house, do the inspection,
yep,
and send you guys a detailed report.
yep. And
So,
and and now, because I've worked with Brandon for so long, and I ask questions like a brand new homeowner every single time we talk, because I look at all of the reports that he sends to my clients, and I'll even ask, I'll say, hey, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? That way, I'm able to translate it to the client if they still didn't quite understand. And so Brandon literally helped me save $15,000 for one of my buyer clients not too long ago. And what I mean by that is, so we had a situation with some relocation clients. If you remember, the older couple, and they were, they're an older couple. They just retired and they wanted to move down south to be closer to their grands and other family that were here in Georgia. And so we were doing the home tour, and immediately when I saw that home, I asked the owner, "Hey, has that roof been changed? Is that the original roof on there?" I could tell that it was, and in the seller's disclosure, there was no indication that the roof had been changed since it's been owned. And so, just by looking at the fact that that roof, the home was built in the early 2000s, And knowing that it was an original roof that was there, I knew that that roof was more than likely uh, coming to its end of use, right? So I, just because I've been around Brandon for so long, and just real estate investing in general, I know that the cost of that size square footage home roof would have been about $10,000 to $15,000. So in the offer, I had written in that the seller were asking for a seller concession to cover the cost of replacing that roof. And the seller agreed. It was a little bit of back and forth between me and the listing agent, and I kind of walked through, hey, this roof is coming up on its end of life. It's gonna need replacing sooner rather than later, and they agreed to it. But when Brandon came out, you inspected the roof, and you actually said, you know what, the roof is actually still in really good shape. But because I had the knowledge, because I'd been around you for so long, and just kind of seeing the way that you operate, I was able to save my clients money. Of course, they'll at some point have to replace that roof, but it was still in
Mhm.
really good condition. So thank you for um, being thorough, because you helped me save my clients a lot of money on that. And you also helped me in another situation that we'll talk about later in this podcast. But you know, when you're working with real estate agents, have you run into any that have given you? Well, let me ask you this first. Tell me about a really bad buyer experience that you've had in your maybe your worst that you had in your inspection career, and what happened.
I remember I had one, and this is, again, going back to when I first started my business. So
Yeah.
I kind of started, jumped in, and I had to learn everything as I was going along. So before I
Right.
didn't have confirmation emails, and
Right.
I think I was actually just starting it with this client, and that was before I didn't do deposits. I didn't do anything as far as those like the stuff we do now. So
Right.
this client was from Canada and was relocating into, I think it was Stone Mountain or something.
Okay.
We did a 4-hour inspection.
Wow.
Um, she was super nice. I explained everything. Went over everything. Super, super thorough, detailed inspection.
Right.
She paid at the end of the inspection when we were leaving,
Yeah.
and then the next day she did a chargeback. The very next morning she did a chargeback.
Wow. Okay.
Yep, and she wouldn't. And at that point, I was just dumbfounded, really, because I was like, I, that's impossible. We walked 3-4 hours, like
Yeah.
no way. So anyway, I got the calling her, and I texted 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
She just wouldn't respond, wouldn't say anything. So luckily, I had enough of a paper trail to
Yeah.
prove that she paid for an inspection. She tried to make it seem like I stole the money or something. It was super. Never happened before. This
Wow.
one time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that worked out, and so that's how I came up with my confirmation emails,
Yeah.
the deposits, the contracts, and
Yeah.
all the steps and routines that I have in place now.
Yeah.
That can never happen again,
Right.
because the client, you have to agree to the services for the services to be rendered or whatnot. So
Of course.
that was a really bad experience. And then one other time, I actually had a guy that I guess he thought that the home inspection was everything. I was going to come in and for one price, which was the home inspection. He
Right.
thought I was going to do radon test, you know, the
Termites.
mold testing,
Yeah.
sewer scopes, and I was like, no, sir. Being professional,
Right.
all those things have additional fees, and I started breaking it down, and he just started getting more and more irate, and
Yeah.
and so I had to end up calling the realtor, and then she had to explain to him like, hey, that's how it goes. But he
Right.
was so mad, like I didn't know what was going to happen at that point, and I was kind of ready just to refund the money and leave, because
Yeah.
I'm just doing my job. It's not my fault, that you didn't know or you weren't informed about certain things.
Right.
I always ask my clients, hey, if you have any questions about anything,
Yeah.
call me, text me, email me.
Yeah.
Nothing's a bad question, because if you don't know, you don't know.
Right. Right.
So now one other thing I wanted to touch on. So when I started doing home inspections, they weren't as detailed. So it was because I was new. So as you go on, I
Right.
started being so detailed, or as detailed as I am now, because I learned what people were looking for.
Okay.
So, investors don't care about all the little small stuff here and there.
Right.
But a first time home buyer, oh, they care about everything. They care about how the
Everybody.
window opens. They care about the why the wall has a dip or a nail pop. So now I let them know, like you say, from top to bottom. I let
Yeah.
them know if the roof is okay, bad, windows, even if the window doesn't lock, if it doesn't
Right.
open properly, if the door doesn't close properly. So I went from being, learning what people want and need, and just getting more experience in the field,
Yeah.
to where I am now. I'm not missing anything.
I love it.
It's just not gonna happen because I have a checklist as far as each room and what I'm gonna do, and then I make sure before I
Yeah.
leave that room I got all my pictures and everything's documented. So
Yeah.
yeah, just it's just for the buyers though, because you want to make sure they don't move in and say, man, that guy didn't tell me about this.
Right. Right. And what I always walk folks through, and if you're enjoying today's podcast where we are talking with Brandon, my go-to home inspector for all my clients here in the great state of Georgia, is, you know, it's important for me when I'm talking with my clients and we find that home that they like and all that. Part of my job as a real estate agent is to give them that consultation, make them aware of how the steps are going to work. It's not just like you see it on HGTV where you just go find a home and then you close on it and everything is perfect. I always explain to them that your job as the inspector is to give a snapshot of that home on that day in question. You cannot speak to anything that happened prior to your visit. You can't speak to anything that might happen 48 hours after your visit. You give a snapshot on that day in question with what's going on in the home. And I also encourage them to go ahead and get a home warranty. Typically, I'll ask for that as the realtor as part of the negotiation process to have a home warranty paid for by the seller. And I think that makes all parties feel like, okay, we're doing good business because as buyers, I got my home inspection, but if anything does go wrong, then typically it'll be covered by the warranty. But at least I did my due diligence as best as possible if I'm a first time home buyer or I'm an owner occupant, period, to know that I bought the best home that was in the best condition that I was comfortable with. Now, as a real estate investor, let me ask you this. What are some of the things that real estate investors should look for when they are looking at purchasing a home to invest in and do other things? What are some of the things that you've noticed in your experience working with real estate investors?
Well, I always tell people, first things first, when you find a property, all the basics.
Yeah.
Everything that you can physically put your hands on or kind of see without straining or struggling,
Right.
you kind of want to thoroughly check. So that would be the foundation.
Right.
When you get to the house, you can easily, most people could, walk around, kind of check it out, make sure there's no cracks, no
Right.
obvious damage, that
Right.
so you don't end up paying for a home inspection just for him or her to tell you, hey, you got a big crack, kind of
Right.
look around, go in the home, cut on the faucets, cut on the sinks, check under everything. Those are all the basic things. Lights, cut your lights on. Maybe if you're there for 20, 30 minutes, maybe cut on
Yeah.
the dishwasher. You're going
Yeah.
to kind of run everything, see what's going on, and kind of gauge it from there. I mean, if
Yeah.
most real estate investors that I work with, they kind of know, all right, I'm gonna have to replace all the floors, or
Right.
cosmetic-y type stuff like that.
Right.
And then if it's a ranch, sometimes you can see the roof. If it's a two-story, you may not. So that's where I would kind of come into play and get you some good pictures of the roof and stuff.
Yeah.
But all of the basics, all the things that you can do easily without straining or struggling or hurting yourself, pretty much.
Okay. I love it. I know for me, I'm not a complete gut job guy. If I'm interested in investing in a property, it's I don't want to say minor stuff, but it's not full renovations. I'm not about that life personally. I like things that I can just add a little bit of value into, force equity in, as you mentioned, maybe by replacing the floor and new paint, things of that nature. So I appreciate the thoroughness that you and other inspectors that really take their job seriously put into the work that they do. Now, I want to pivot a little bit, and we're landing the plane here, and I want to speak to some of the other businesses and endeavors that you have with your company. Um, if you are watching this on YouTube, you probably can see behind me that our studio has recently been revamped, and Brandon has another company that he actually was the one. His team helped me redo the paint and everything in the studio. So walk folks through some of the other endeavors that you are able to assist folks with here in the state of Georgia and your other real estate related businesses.
All right, so we have Precision Home Services, and
Yeah,
that is totally geared for anything home, residential. So that can be anything minor from outlet replacement,
yeah,
light fixture replacement, pressure washing, and any type of handyman work,
yeah.
um, lawn care. It's any type of home services. Nothing's too big or too small. We don't do anything as far as like replacing roofs or HVAC,
Right,
um, or anything at like the electrical panel, like a major, something like that. Those jobs we would kind of send out to another person.
right,
But anything that falls under those other things, we're willing to do drywall repair, mold remediation. We can even finish a basement. We can remodel bathrooms.
yeah,
So I try to post as much of that stuff as I can on our page,
yeah.
and it kind of gives people more of an insight on what all we can do. Because it's just the other day we did something like have you ever seen the front door frames on the exterior home? The around the glass, it started to rot out.
Oh wow. Okay.
So this was actually yesterday, and we replaced all the framing on the front and outside of the door, and we painted
Wow.
the whole entire door back black.
Wow.
Um,
That's
so
awesome.
like any type of job, and that was a job that they called and was like, "Hey man, I just bought." He had already bought all the stuff we needed, and he was like, "Do you do something like this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And, we knocked it out. It took about 4 or 5 hours.
Yep.
So any job.
And I appreciate, like I said, his team did all the paint work that you see behind me on YouTube. Did an amazing job, and then he did some other things around the home, around our home here. But give Brandon and his team a call. I'm going to put his contact information in the show notes of this podcast. Let him know that you found him from the Equity Podcast, and I usually for my guests they do something special if you found Brandon from this particular video. So whatever Brandon is, may offer as like a promotion or anything for listeners here, you'll see that information in the show notes of this podcast and on YouTube. If you are a real estate professional, and you're in Georgia, and you're in and around the Atlanta area, you need to dial in with Brandon. If you do not have him on your team, you are tripping with yourself, and you are doing your clients a disservice because he does amazing work. Brandon, do you have any last words that you'd like to share with the audience, or anything you want buyers and sellers to know as it relates to, and for sellers that want to get their home ready to sell?
Okay, yeah, definitely. For sellers, we definitely can, help out as far as letting you know what an inspector is looking for the on the buyer's end.
Okay.
That's the best way to sell your home at the highest price, or
Yeah.
for your benefit or whatnot. Don't be surprised. A lot of times, we go to homes, and it does sometimes depend on the inspector. You might not have a detailed, thorough inspector, and you might say, everything looks good or whatnot.
Yeah. Right.
Do your research. Make sure the home inspector has good reviews. Some type of standing online as far as a website presence or whatnot.
Yeah.
For our buyers, so it's a lot more available. But again, always get an inspection because you never know. Um, $400 can save you from having a major problem that you didn't know about.
Yeah.
and it could save you a lot of money and headaches. So I always suggest, and a lot of us are available as far as I'm always open to answering questions.
Yeah.
People email me pricing. If any questions, we're always here to help.
Yeah.
And good thing about our company is that we're not one of those big companies like Inspect All. Their prices is normally 600, 700, like out the gate
Right.
before you add any additional services, and you're just a number.
Right.
With me, I do FaceTime calls. I do,
Yep.
meet and greets. I walk our clients through the home.
Yep.
I don't alert the clients to anything that's like, as far as I'm not trying to kill the deal, is what I'm trying to say. I
Right.
let them know exactly what I see,
Right.
and I put pictures of those things to back up what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So uh, small business is sometimes a little bit better for those reasons, and the personal, we're a little bit more personable, and
Yeah.
we're available. You know what I mean?
I love it. I
So,
love it. And, like I said, I just want to tell you again how much I appreciate the work you do for the clients that I serve. They always tell me, how great you have done. And it was a recent uh, closing that, I wasn't even the realtor involved in it. But it was a client of mine in my other business, her daughter. And she was like, the daughter was in need of a home, had already gone under contract. She was buying a new construction. And she asked if, hey, do you know anybody that's an inspector? And I was like, oh, of course I do. So even if I'm not directly involved in the deal, I still leverage Brandon and say, hey, look, you need to give his company a call. And she called me and she was like, Marvin, oh my goodness, he was so thorough. And I said, I told you, he is. And so, kudos to you because they just got moved in. They're super excited about their investment, and that peace of mind really means a lot to a lot of folks. So again, if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, wherever, be sure to give us a 5-star rating. If you are watching the video version of this podcast on YouTube or Facebook, let me know in the comments below what questions you have for Brandon, and if we get enough of the same type of question, I don't doubt that Brandon will be more than happy to come on and do a secondary video. So until the next podcast, this is your brother, your boy, your uncle, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor signing off. Thank you again, Brandon.
all right, take care. I appreciate it.